Good evening. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. Today with me we have Nina Sherwood, who's going to speak principally about fracking, but we'll be discussing some other things between tonight's show and tomorrow's show, the one at noon 30 on Thursday. Couple things before we get started. I want to say something that's been on my mind for a while because I rarely take the opportunity to say a nice thing about Mayor Mark Boughton of Danbury. But it's been a while now since he and his wife Phyllis decided to get to separate and ultimately get divorced. And I saw the news conference that they held together. And you know, sometimes politicians, especially ones that are ultimately going to run for governor, like Mark is, they'll get up there and they'll make a remark about, oh, you know, we're going to stay friends, and you know they're basically full of it. Well, Mark and Phyllis got up there and they talked about how they've been together a lot of years, and they, like a lot of couples, they just basically have grown apart, and that they plan on carrying on a civil and reasonable relationship with each other. I don't know if they said friendship, but you know, and let me tell you, they were extremely sincere, and I took it to heart, and I thought that was. I'm going to throw them a big congratulations and kudos out to both Mark and Phyllis on that. Thank you for finally being a political couple that did it sincerely, honestly, and right. Having said that, I'm going to take, here is, as you can read, Mayor Mark Boughton. Now, this is not my fault. I didn't name him that. But if you take these two sheets of paper and gradually separate them, you end up with Mayor Mark Bought On. Now the question for Mayor Bought On is, when was he bought and who did the buying? Okay, so I like to balance things out, and always a compliment to go along with some criticism. Okay, now on camera number 2, I want to have to make my weekly shout out to Basil Budakat, exclamation point, who is the host of another show that I'm involved in, Basil Budakat Presents, exclamation point. And Basil claims that even though Progressive Soup has been on for 8 years, and Basil Budakat Presents, exclamation point, has only been on for 5 years, he's still claiming that he got me this gig. So I want to set him straight on that. If you're out there, Basil, no, you did not, but there's your plug for your show. He's on Friday, 10 p.m., and his more religious-oriented show, Basil Budakat Presents, didn't get it right that time, is on Sunday at 10 p.m. Friday and 11 a.m. Sunday on Comcast. He's also on Omni. We haven't got on Charter yet because they say his show's a little too raucous and a little too rough around the edges. But anyway, so onward. Nina Sherwood.
Hi.
You are here to talk about a lot of things. Let's start with fracking. First of all, tell us about what we have on your business card right here, Politics Reborn. What is Politics Reborn, and what is your objective?
It's a non-for-profit organization that came out of the Bernie Sanders campaign, where we saw this massive uprising from the grassroots of people who were never involved in politics before, who were never like into it with the issues. They became individuals who were active citizens in their community. And so after the election, we didn't want anybody to basically drop off from that. So Politics Reborn was born from the idea that we should empower people from the bottom up to organize themselves, and not just running for elections. It's very much a bottom-up organization, whereas there's a lot of organizations, Move On, et cetera, that are top-down. They endorse candidates. They ask people to make phone calls to support those candidates. And in this case, we're giving people the tools in order to organize themselves, so that regardless of who's in office, if there's a community of organized people who understand their local issues, then they're going to be able to influence policy regardless of who's in office. So as you probably know, if you go to the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, they have a bunch of tools. They have email addresses and phone numbers. They have ways of organizing people, whereas Politics Reborn offers people who don't have those connections with either one of the two party systems, it offers them those tools. So we offer communication systems, software, we offer different tools that make it easier for people to organize within their own community, plus we mentor people who want to be organizers. So that's what we're doing, and we're building from the bottom up.
Point well made about Move On, that they're very top down. And somewhere in between your organization and Move On, there's an organization called Democracy for America,
right,
which does both.
It does both.
It's top down. Jim
Yep.
Dean, Howard Dean's brother, took over Democracy for America, which by the way is over a million members now. So it's a pretty formidable organization.
Yep.
But Democracy for America has their members vote on things. Who should we endorse in this election, that election? Help us find candidates that are good quality candidates, whether it be for a school board, something minor and local, right on up to president. And in a year when the Democratic Party was so let's say gung-ho on Hillary Clinton that it was her time, she deserved it. Democracy for America had a vote amongst their members, and I think it was about 88% of Democracy for America's members endorsed Bernie Sanders.
Yep, I was one of them.
Thank you. Okay, my dear Aunt, fracking. Tell us about fracking.
Okay, so fracking waste, even though Connecticut is not a state that actually does fracking, for anybody who doesn't know what fracking is, it is a way to extract fossil fuels from the ground, basically, by injecting water and chemicals into the ground, which kind of collect fossil fuels, and they come up on the other end. I mean, that's a really, really rudimentary way for me to explain it, but that's essentially it. And what it does is it pulls up, obviously, fossil fuels, but you also get a bunch of waste in the form of a liquid. It's called fracking waste. And that fracking waste needs to be stored somewhere. Now, Connecticut is not a state that has shale oil or anything that can be fracked. But and there's over 20 states that are fracking right now, and they're creating a tremendous amount of waste. And those wastes are in barrels, and the fossil fuel industry pays cities, states, municipalities to house that fracking waste. To take it off their hands, they pay them. And so in 2014, there was a bill in the Connecticut Legislature to prevent the entire state from being able to frack, from being able to take money to house the fracking waste. And that bill was pretty much, some Republicans were on board and all the Democrats were on board. The governor came in and said, well, wait a minute, let's not ban it completely. We don't know enough about it. Let's let the Department of Environmental Protection and Energy, look at the situation and see if they can find a safe way to house toxic waste within our state. And so he had asked the legislature, instead of passing an outright ban, to do a 3-year moratorium on it. That was 2014. The 3-year moratorium is up on July 1st of this year, 2017. And so there's a few things that are happening within the state. There is a ban that it has been written and has been brought to the legislature. There's definitely support for that, some bipartisan support in Hartford for it. But we have not heard anything from the governor as to whether or not he would pass it. It wasn't something he wanted to pass in 2014. So we've teamed up with Food and Water Watch, who have been really great on this issue. And what they're doing is, if a state is not going to pass an outright ban, they've been passing ordinances by municipality so that to ban fracking waste. So for example, in New York State, this particular legislation has been passed in 400 municipalities, and we just started here in Connecticut, and it's been passed in 10, including Windham and Middletown was the most recent city to pass it.
We upstaters call it Wyndham, but that's
Wyndham, sorry, I'm terrible. And I've lived here all my life.
It's 169 towns. That's a lot of towns to remember.
Yep.
It's a lot of towns that you may not have heard of. And
I'm sure.
And I probably haven't heard of all of them.
I'm sure. So it's been passed in 10 cities in Connecticut, and it's in committee in Stamford and in Norwalk. It's being brought to the table in Westport, and the biggest push that we're doing is actually in Bridgeport, because
Why Bridgeport?
Bridgeport is one of the only cities in the state that would actually house the fracking waste. They have the facilities to do that. And so that's a huge step if we can get Bridgeport to ban fracking waste. Because, a lot of people say, well, why are you trying to pass it in Stamford or in Norwalk? And if Stamford and Norwalk aren't going to be housing it. And there's a lot of reasons for that. The first reason is this is our state, and we don't want there to be any kind of toxic waste that we're housing for the fossil fuel industry, no matter how much money they pay for us. That doesn't make sense for the citizens of the state. The second is we'd like to send a message to Hartford. Hey, listen, the city of Stamford, the city of Norwalk, all these different municipalities that are passing this, Middletown, et cetera, believe in this so much that we're willing to pass it within our own city. It also, the ordinance also has language that prevents the transportation of fracking waste. So, if we pass it in Stamford, they're not going to be able to bring the stuff in from 95. And the fracking waste is mostly going to be coming from Pennsylvania if it does get passed here. So we really want to get it passed in Bridgeport, because if Bridgeport can't legally house the stuff through ordinance, then it's going to be much more difficult for the state to be able to house it. And Bridgeport, I live in Stamford. I'm like 15 miles from Bridgeport. Mm-hmm. So I think it's incredibly important. Bridgeport also, provides water to a lot of cities. The water system in Bridgeport sends water, especially we've had a 23-month, we're in our 23rd month of drought in Connecticut. Mm-hmm. So we're now getting water from Bridgeport and other municipalities, and we need to be worried about this stuff, because in other places where fracking waste has been stored, it has caused leaks into water, and a lot of it is even airborne. So there's a lot of issues with this, and I'm hoping to protect the state.
What are the airborne potential dangers? What about a liquid that could become airborne?
Well, anything that is a liquid could evaporate, and that, breathing it in causes lung issues, it causes skin problems, it's been directly linked to cancer. And the crazy thing is that the industry, they complain about, the fossil fuel industry complains about being regulated heavily. But the reality of it is, with fracking, which has been by many scientists determined to be one of the most harmful ways of extracting fossil fuels from the earth, what's happening is that you have a situation where all of these chemicals, which don't, even though it's well regulated, they don't have to, the fossil fuel industry doesn't even have to say which chemicals they are. They release what they want, and the law actually says that they don't have to say everything that is in the fracking waste. And so we know, just from what they've disclosed to us, we know what those chemicals that they've disclosed to us are and what their hazards are, which include respiratory issues, they include cancer risk, they include all sorts of, problems that we would encounter with any kind of toxin. And then on top of it, they also, some of the toxins they don't disclose. So there could be a wide range of effects from this that we don't even know about, simply because they don't have to disclose.
How and why would they not be required to disclose what potential carcinogens are in fracking waste? Why? How?
Because it's written into the law. And it's written into the law for no other reason except that these industries put a tremendous amount of money into our political system, into writing laws, into influencing laws. And this is the outcome of that system that we have of allowing money into our political structure.
I imagine it might be something maybe about trade secrets that, we don't want to tell you what's in our...
Oh, yeah.
We don't want to tell you what we've got because we don't want our competitors to know.
They say all of that, but, it's they're probably discussing with each other different things that work best or whatever. I mean,
bit of collusion, perhaps?
That's on the outside. That's what they're saying, and that's what their lawyers are arguing. But we can't, it's not about, on a public, when it comes to public health, it shouldn't be about what's best for the corporation. If we're at risk and the citizens of the country or the state are at risk, we need to count on our politicians to actually protect us from that. And if they're allowing laws to be written that don't protect us from that on a national level, I want to look to my politicians on a local level and on a state level to protect us, which is why I was like, oh my God, Connecticut's thinking about allowing fracking waste? That's, that was alarming to me, and that's really why we picked up this issue, because it affects everybody. It affects everybody.
Quick shout out to Jen Siskin,
yes, she's amazing.
Who was on the show about a month ago and talked at length about she's very chemical and very scientific and
she's amazing.
A bit dry, but she gave us the nuts and the bolts of the thing, and I believe she talked about there being some radioactive byproducts that come out of the ground.
Oh yeah.
So it's not just a matter of poisons, not just a matter of poisons short term, but it comes down to radioactive wastes, which has a shelf life of literally hundreds and even thousands and even tens of thousands of years. Uranium, I think the half-life is, it takes a pound of it, it takes 10,000 years for a pound to become a half a pound.
Right.
Another 10,000 years for a half a pound to become a quarter of a pound. So we're talking about very, very long-term damage.
Right, and if it leaks, which it's been known to leak, we'll have this stuff around without really an effective way of getting rid of it. And these companies will pay X amount of money for us to store it, but what are they going to pay for cleanup?
They never do.
They never do. And so we can't expect that to happen, and we can't put any of our citizens or our environment at risk. So that's why we're doing this.
Well, we know from locally, for those of us that have been around this part of Connecticut for a while, a little company over in Newtown named Batchelder Aluminum that smelted aluminum down and recast it and purified the aluminum. They got the aluminum cans in, they melted them down, they purified the aluminum and sent it back out to be used on other aluminum cans. And they've got what do they call a Superfund site over there in Newtown. Now, when the companies profit from their bad behavior, but it's always the public. It's always you and me and other taxpayers that foot the bill to clean it up, because the company goes insolvent and whines about how they can't afford to do it. So we end up footing the bill for the cleanup, and that just happens over and over again. Continue.
Yeah. So, we're pushing. We were lucky in Stamford and Norwalk. We were able to talk to some of the municipal legislators who wanted to take up this issue because they saw that it was something that was good for the community. And so that's why it's in committee now in those cities, along with Westport. In Bridgeport, it hasn't, been as easy, so we're going to be collecting signatures to do that.
So. Nice. Well, that's a pretty good overview of the issue of fracking. But obviously, Politics Reborn is not a one-issue group.
Right.
Tell the audience about another issue that you're involved in.
Well, we're looking at the issue of Sanctuary City, which actually happens to focus also in Bridgeport. Bridgeport is the largest city in Connecticut, and it also has Democratic leadership. It has for years. And Mayor Ganem there has refused to declare Bridgeport as a sanctuary city. And there's a lot of immigrants there, and it just doesn't make sense. I mean, especially with Trump being elected, there are people who are living in fear every day in our country. And I'd like to think that in Connecticut, we would have politicians, especially within the Democratic Party, that would protect our immigrant brothers and sisters. And to this point, that hasn't happened. There's been a lot of resistance in Bridgeport. So we're also going to be collecting signatures and educating people on that issue in Bridgeport as well.
That's certainly the talk we hear. That's the talk the Democratic Party talks.
Right.
Now the question is, are they going to walk that walk? What are some of the other cities in Connecticut? Are any of them declared as sanctuary cities?
I know that Middletown is declared to be a sanctuary city, which has helped a lot of the citizens of that city. They don't feel, I mean, sanctuary city means a lot of things. But to me, and I think to a lot of people, the biggest issue is making sure people aren't living day in and day out in fear. When I was in high school, my best friend was an immigrant. She didn't have any paperwork here. She was from Lithuania, and she lived in fear every day. Like, even if we got pulled over, if I was driving and I got pulled over and she was in the car, or there was any situation, she was constantly in fear. And that was like, you know, the first time I had ever seen anything like that. And like, to actually see somebody, a kid, being afraid that they're gonna get deported, or like, that's a heavy load to bear. And I think about that, what if she was a mom? How many people, or like parents who are working and they're probably making less than minimum wage because they're not legal. And then on top of everything, you know, they can't drive, they have to, you know, all these things, all these hurdles they have to cross, and then also they have this huge weight on their back that they are, you know, whatever illegal means. I don't even like to use that term, but they're undocumented here. And there's no pathway for them to neutralize or naturalize themselves. And it's concerning that we in Connecticut, with Democratic leadership, the Democratic Party is talking about this issue and trying to be a champion for this issue, that we wouldn't become leaders in that. And, you know, it goes from everything from making people feel safe to if something like, if you're an immigrant and somebody robs your house, there's a lot of people who won't call the cops because they're afraid of being questioned by the cops and asked for papers and your ID and all that stuff. And that's a huge issue. That's not who we are in Connecticut.
Day laborers who work the day,
and then
the boss refuses to pay them and
it's
says,
awful.
And basically says, hey, what are you going to do about it? No, sorry, I didn't pay you. Why don't you come back tomorrow? Maybe I'll pay you. Now, the audience knows that I'm of Irish ancestry. My dad's parents came here in about 1910, and things were a little different for them than the immigrants that are coming from Central America and South America, Syria and other countries. A little different for them back then. My grandparents got off the boat at Ellis Island, had a cursory check to make sure that they were not suffering from any disease, and there was somebody waiting for them that vouched for them, brought them back to the Warburg Estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, and they became caretakers on the Warburg Estate in Greenwich. Never had to go through any of this, well, I'll use an Irish word, malarkey, about having to going through a 20-year process for citizenship. They got here, bang, they were citizens. My father became a citizen, never had to worry about being deported, never had to worry about his parents being dragged by their collars from the Warburg Estate and sent back to Ireland. Matter of fact, right now, and this happened on St. Patrick's Day, the President of Ireland asked our president, I forget what his name is, but I think he's got orangish hair and kind of a dumb-looking guy. Asked our president, would he mind declaring that all the Irish people that are here illegally or undocumented-wise in America be given citizenship, full citizenship. Now, we Irish people have known for a long time that at any given moment there are at least 1 million Irish people in the city of Boston, just in the city of Boston, as undocumented or illegal citizens here at any given time, and not seeing anybody from ICE or anybody from the Trump administration reaching out and trying to deport them. Well, they're white. Let's face it. I mean, that's a lot of it right there, because they're white, They're not brown-skinned. They're not from South America. They're not from Central America. They're not from Syria. They're not from any of the countries that are in serious danger from civil wars and from people being murdered by their own governments. People from, was it Ecuador that there's a civil war going on? Where kids are where parents are paying to have their kids taken from Ecuador up through Central America, through Mexico to America, because they're afraid their kids are going to end up either dead or in the sex trade.
Oh my God.
And so the parents are doing whatever they can to save their children's lives. And this administration wants to punish them for that and punish their children for that. Well, there's a respect for life for you. No pun intended. Continue.
So it's funny you bring that up about your parents and your Irish heritage. I'm also Irish. But my mother was actually born and raised in Italy and came over when she was 16 to work in a switchboard factory in Norwalk. And my mother never got her citizenship, but she is a legal alien resident, and she's married to my father, who was born and raised in Connecticut. And so she's definitely legal here. But even she is afraid that if she leaves because she's not a citizen, that she's going to have a problem getting back in. And I know that that's, it's not actually something that would happen. They would let her back in. But she's talked about that. And so somebody who actually is legal here is concerned with the tone of the country. I can't imagine what it feels like to be an immigrant in this country right now. And I know a lot of people who were brought here who, from no fault of their own, they were brought here from somebody else when they were really young. So, I mean, we have to do everything that we can here at home to protect people from that kind of fear and protect them from whatever's coming down the pike from the orange man.
So, the orange man, yeah. I keep thinking of Anita Bryant because she was another nut that had an orange attached to her name. But so if she went back to Italy, let's say someone in the family became sick, she goes back to Italy, there's a possibility that she may not be able to come back to the country where she's lived for how long?
She's been here for over 40 years, 45 years.
And there's a possibility?
Well, she would definitely be able to get back in. I mean, she's married to a U.S. citizen, but the fact that she's not a U.S. citizen herself and she's legal here, she's brought it up. So my point is that she would get back in, but it's been a concern for her, and I can't imagine what it would be like for somebody who doesn't have the legal paperwork that she does.
Come back tomorrow. We'll be here. Noon 30 tomorrow, Thursday. Of course, for you folks in Comcast, Charter, and Omni, you'll see us a different day. Thanks for joining us. Progressive Soup, Nina Sherwood, and I'm David Stevenson. Thanks for joining us.